Mr. Begley and members of the board, we do have several items for board discussion this evening. Our first item is a board policy. I'll turn it over to Ms. Slane.
Thank you. Mr. Begley, members of the board, I have an update to policy DID regarding inventories and fixed assets. As you see, there's a couple of minor changes here. We are proposing to increase our inventory cost of equipment as far as useful life of 5 years or more to be tagged and inventoried from $1,000 to $5,000. We're also proposing a change for fixed assets that have to be tracked from $1,500, again, to that $5,000 threshold. Our state auditors, our financial auditors have come in every year, have questioned as to why we have such a low threshold for fixed assets. So I am proposing that we increase that. It falls in line with the federal guidelines that have recently been sent down too regarding our ARP and ESSER funds. They consider $5,000 to be equipment, the threshold to be used for equipment versus a supply. I will let you know that our inventory of all our technology items are kept by our technology department separately from other equipment and supply items. So we do track that, and this would be effective for next school year, starting July 1. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
That'll
right.
be on the next board agenda, I'm sorry, for approval.
All right, all good. All right, up next, we have job descriptions. Turn it over to Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley, members of the board, there are several job descriptions, I believe 8 of them this evening. Each spring, we undergo, according to our contract with our professional staff, we undergo a review of our extracurricular contracts and look at new positions to give students more opportunity for extracurriculars. We did that in April. In May, you voted on, and we received 10 new or revised extracurriculars, and now we're completing that process, changing or writing new job descriptions for each of those positions. And so we have those job description for our intramural volleyball coach at Central, the house tribal coordinator at Freshman, the dance team assistant coach at the high school, after-school tutoring coordinator at Creekside, the intramural soccer coach for 6th grade at Creekside, changing the wrestling head coach, making it boys and girls at the senior high, a softball assistant at Freshman, and changing the position of volleyball, the varsity head coach for boys at the senior high. We have the job descriptions. I sent those to you, and I would entertain any questions you have regarding those job descriptions.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and I will be covering the next 2 items for discussion. Up first, we have electronic board packets. Just like to have any input from the board regarding a movement to do away from bringing hard copies of the agenda and presentations for future board meetings. It's something that we are doing across the district, trying to reduce the amount of paper. It saves time, it saves money, just is more efficient. It's kind of the way of the world, how things are going. I would like to say that we will not be purchasing any devices. We would utilize devices that we already have inside of the district. You know, if the board is agreeable to this, then I would have some conversation with our technology department regarding, what this looks like. I anticipate, a laptop here waiting for you with a file, and you open it up and it has the board agenda and presentations. But again, it's a suggestion, and I'm bringing it to the board tonight to see if there's any interest in making that transition. If not, we can continue to go the folder and hard copies route.
Any comments? Personally, I'm fine with the electronic version. If maybe there's a notepad that we could even bring or supply to make notes on, because I do jot some notes, but usually it's on the side of the folder anyway. It's nice to have these, but I'm all for the electronic version, personally.
Yeah, kind of running out of room in my file cabinet at home for some of these folders, but, yeah, it is nice to write something down, but I can always, yeah, we can always bring our own notepads to do that, so. And I think as long as we still get an electronic copy on our email, then we can go back and look at the presentations later if we need to.
Yes, I would add that as
Yeah.
well, because we pre-see those anyway. We get to
Yes,
view
none
those.
of that would change. The only thing that would be different, you just wouldn't have an actual folder in front of you.
We have those
that
nice
evening.
portfolios that we got for Christmas.
Yeah.
We can jot stuff in.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I fully support it. I was just gonna also mention the nice portfolio that we received earlier in the year that we could use to jot notes on. And I would maybe think that, maybe not something with a keyboard that's clicky that we can make a bunch of noise on. But that's just a suggestion.
Okay.
Well, I like taking notes, but as Nancy can attest, I'm always having to borrow an ink pen from her. But I can probably do something electronically with, I don't know, there's probably a note system in it or something. So that would be fine,
Okay.
and I wouldn't have to worry about
Okay.
an
Great.
ink pen.
Well, we will start that transition at our next meeting, which will be June 28th. And we'll see how it goes from there. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Great. All right, up next, next item for board discussion, a performance contract for our Human Resources Director, Mrs. Hauer. As you know, Ms. Myers left the district. Her last day was Friday, May 27th, and Mrs. Hauer's first date and official first date as HR Director is July 1, so we have about a 5-week gap there. Requesting this 5-day contract for Mrs. Hauer to help us close that gap. In fact, already this week, she is actually running interview processes across the district, which normally an HR director would do. The issue is that she only has so many days of work as the principal at Compass. So, and she indicated she may not even use all 5 days, so it's up to a maximum of 5 days. So I'd like for the board to consider that this evening. And I do have that as an item for board action because it would be from the dates of June 2nd through June 30th, 2022. And the last thing I'll add, just an additional consideration for that, is that this is a very, very busy time for HR because the school year ended, people are resigning, we're having to hire new people in those positions. So it's a very, their busiest time of the year is in the summer.
Absolutely.
So, any questions on that?
Yeah. Any concerns there? Yeah.
All right. Our next item is a transportation audit update, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley, members of the board. Tonight, as a topic of discussion, wanted to start to dig a little deeper into the transportation audit. And at the beginning of this presentation, I'll try to go through a broader overview of the entire audit and then focus in on one particular piece of it for this evening. As previously discussed, we have completed a transportation audit, which we use the services of OSBA. The OSBA employee to complete the audit was Doug Palmer. Mr. Palmer has completed over 20 years of specialized transportation experience and has been conducting Ohio School District audits for the past 6 years and is the instructor of the Master of Transportation Administration program, which is a 3-year program through the OSBA. I actually have attended that program the full 3 years, and I can't tell you how much information, and it's really good stuff. The full department audit included a labor study of all staff, analyzed departmental efficiencies as it pertains to compliance, processes, and procedures. A fleet study, which included the current condition and maintenance of our current bus fleet, as well as options moving forward for a purchasing plan. Jeanette Flick and Bill Westerbeck, both are administrators within transportation, both provided information to assist. Such information as routing information, bus maintenance, current procedures, and current forms used, such as pre-trip checklists. In addition, Mr. Palmer was on site for 3 days in the month of February. During this time, he spent the time with staff, observed work routine, asked questions, completed a checklist for each physical bus. Additionally, Bill, Jeanette, and myself have been engaging throughout the year with buildings to identify areas to provide better support. We shared this information with Doug so he would be able to guide the assessments on best practices specifically for Fairfield City School District. As an example of some of the topics were ways to develop training for staff that would have direct and positive impacts supporting the parents, teachers, students of each school. The audit information we received was four written summaries supported with 4 separate spreadsheets. Some of these spreadsheets contained more than 10 tabs. The information was a lot. Needless to say, we are still working through all of the details. Jeanette, Bill, and myself have met with Mr. Palmer multiple times via Zoom calls, and will continue to meet with him as we work through the next steps of planning and implementation. So, the area that we focused on tonight is the labor study and department efficiencies. A 90-point checklist was used with 4 primary categories: supplemental department procedures, personnel policies, drug and alcohol testing programs, and overall safety. Overall, the department was very successful, but we're able to provide some areas to improve. Helping to identify and develop training areas and de-escalation in particular, and in particular, how to interact with parents, student discipline, and unique situational assessments. One of the areas that was highlighted was when we spoke to some of our special ed drivers and some of the aides, we identified some areas where we've already been engaging with Ms. Gilbert on identifying some trainings for those people in particular due to some unique situations that they deal with. In addition to that, we need to update and maintain a transportation handbook. This will focus on documenting our current practices and will help, while these change over time, to identify and maintain. Another area was a lack of on-site fleet management. The current process is that if a driver perceives a problem with the bus, it is automatically taken in for service. Additional steps taken may result in a cost savings. Recommendation, which I'm pretty much condensing down to one slide about 16 pages of information that he provided. So from that, there was one primary recommendation that I wanted to highlight. The recommendation of an additional staff member was supported by the observations by Mr. Palmer while on site. All of the office staff was very busy with internal and external customer service related activities, such as discipline referrals, pulling videos as needed, answering phones, driver update, changes to rosters, and parent concerns. At no point in time during the time that he was on site, no one was available to follow up with any fleet concerns with drivers or able to leave the office area for the majority of the instructional day. I'll highlight why that's important later. After some discussion, the best solution for an additional person would be designated as a trainer/safety coordinator. To begin the year, we had 3 driver trainers. One has retired during this school year, and the other 2 are eligible to retire within the next 1 to 2 years. This person would be the primary trainer for all new drivers and current drivers. This also would include driver observations, recertifications, and ride-alongs. This position would allow the flexibility needed to physically address site visits to bus stops and other safety-related concerns. In addition, this person would assist in establishing bus stop locations and processing special needs transportation requests, assist in coordinating and monitoring of daytime field trips, after-school events, and summer programs. When it comes to fleet management, this person would also be able to, at some level, be able to check on buses before they are sent out automatically for service. In addition, office support as needed. Currently, there are drivers that work extra hours that come into the office to do things such as file pre-trip checklists, which one has to be completed each time the bus leaves the lot, so every single bus, every single day. Answer phones and other related activities. Transition into, bus driver benefits and support. For new drivers, this would increase availability. Currently, our driver trainers are only available on middays. And this would also allow faster turnaround and increased consistency. So currently, when we're training new drivers to get them to be able to take on routes, because all of our drivers are the trainers, we have to wait until we have times in the midday in between their AM and PM routes to be able to schedule time to be able to get those people in to train them. And over time, it's 1 and 2 hour blocks, where we were hoping that with this position, we might be able to do full day blocks if we're able to move around some of the tasks, et cetera. For current drivers, it's also more accurate evaluations, in particular because of ride-alongs. Better driver development in the short and long term, a proactive approach with student management and parental concerns. We will be able to observe and train as concerns develop. Currently, there are additional hours needed in the office, as I alluded to before, to process paperwork, and that would be reduced yet eliminated. I keep on coming back to being able to do ride-alongs. What I mean by that is, for proper or the best evaluations possible, observing a driver while they are completing the task is the best way to do that. And then when we do receive driver concerns from parents and even students or even buildings, we wanted to take that opportunity that this person could ride on the bus, observe what's going on, and then provide that feedback specific to what we're seeing while they're actively driving. Benefits from a perspective of customer service. Quicker response time for building requests, being video surveillance, student discipline referrals, requested route and stop changes for students, which occur on a daily basis, an additional liaison between the building administrators and the drivers. And one of the things that I'm highlighting is something that came directly out of our feedback in addressing with the sites is PBIS training and the ability to be consistent with our vocabulary from the drivers to the building. That is one thing we're actually implementing that to already. We've identified time to begin that training to start this next year. For student and parent support, extra steps in the process to investigate safety concerns, whether it be bus stops, driver concerns, or student behavior. Overall, we are looking for better bus management and a more proactive approach, especially when it comes to bus referrals. In investigating safety concerns, one of the best things that we can do when it comes to most of the concerns is they are off-site. They are the location of a bus stop, or it's an activity that occurs on the bus while the driver is driving, which is their focus needs to be in front of them. And the ability to have a person be able to physically identify these areas, look at it, come up with solutions, and or be on the bus to help manage if needed. would be a much, much better approach and an overall improved experience from pickup to drop off. Do you have any questions?
Questions?
I have one. So we have one retiree, right, and then two in the near future?
Correct.
So are we backfilling them, so we'll have 4 total?
3. So currently, the discussions, which has not been made public or with the union in particular, the idea about this position would be that it would be an ESC position, so they would not be in the union, which would allow them to provide feedback that can be utilized in the evaluation, which currently that cannot happen. We would still utilize them as trainers until they retire. Probably one of the reasons why is because all 3, even the one that, did retire, they are respected in a way, like from Columbus, they are known. They are excellent at what they do. So it actually would be nice if both of those current driver trainers, if we're able to hire this position in some ways, we would utilize them to even help train this person. So we would still utilize them as needed, which would be nice, but eventually the goal would be is to solely train through this new position.
So this position would just fill the first retiree?
Correct.
Okay. But it would be under different guidelines
Correct.
than what it is now?
Correct.
More flexibility to us
That's correct.
as far as reporting and observations?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
First, I think this speaks to what a great job Mr. Westerbeck does right now, himself and his very small staff. And the auditor that did this feels that this is, if we add another employee, it would be more consistent with what they see across school districts in the state.
Yeah, in our discussions, in our meetings, we asked the question, how do we compare, to a comparable school district from the perspective of transportation? So I say that because not financial per se, but more like miles and routes and number of children transported. And he did compare us to a school district in the suburb of Columbus for that purpose. They actually have 3 more people than we do that pertain to transportation-related things. One of those, actually, they have a discipline administrator that handles all discipline for the district. So they do have a finger, so it's not a full 3. But through our discussions with Mr. Palmer and Jeanette and Bill, the approach we're trying to take is that there are efficiencies that we can be better at. We've identified those. And I believe we will identify more through the process. So the idea is, this is, to me, the biggest bang for our buck. This is where we could make the biggest impact to all parties, to our students, our parents, our buildings, and even to our drivers and the office staff in particular.
And if I could just add, I mean, this was not a surprise to us. We've talked for years. We knew that we were understaffed in our transportation department, and I'm not surprised that a similar district might even have 3 additional individuals. But, this is, another example of us trying to be fiscally responsible, but at the same point in time, looking at, customer service and safety. Those are 2 very important topics for us. And, I know that sometimes board members go on tours of buildings. You're welcome at any time next year. I think you would be fascinated to go on a tour of transportation. It is hopping over there. A lot of times people call transportation and they're not able to get through. That is very common, because we know this, because then they will call the district office and say that they cannot get through. But it's simply because they're understaffed. And again, this is a long time coming. But again, the reason for the delay is we try to do the very best that we can with what we have. You know, if you remember a couple of years ago, we used to purchase 5 buses a year, and are we down to 2 a year now? You know, again, just another example of trying to cut back where we can, but we feel like at this point, you know, it's in the best interest of the transportation department and the district to add an additional staff member to provide some support there, particularly when it comes to customer service and safety.
I really liked what you had to say about the positive behavior training and that being consistent with what they're going to receive 3 minutes later when they walk in the building, right? And I think it will be beneficial to students, but I think also as we try to hire drivers and retain drivers, some of these increased consistency in the terms of training and better flexibility there should help that as well.
Yeah, one note I made that I forgot to mention, my first meeting after the site visit that I had with Mr. Palmer, the first thing he said was that they were an absolute delight to work with.
Good.
Which that made me, I was very pleased to hear that, you know, all the staff put a good foot forward and respected the process. And he spoke very highly to the work ethic which he witnessed. So I just thought that was interesting. That was his first statement on the first meeting, which I thought was great. So,
Thanks for sharing that.
Excellent.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate
Anyone
it.
else?
I did have a quick question. First, I mean, this does seem like it could generate some cost savings in the long run if you have, like you said, another person checking out possible issues with buses before we send them in for service. And it seems to make a lot of sense. My only question was where you talked about the reduction or elimination of drivers working extra hours. And I apologize for my ignorance, but are you meaning like, do they get overtime? Would we be reducing or eliminating overtime, or?
It's not overtime, it's additional hours worked at a different rate than their driver rate. But what we do is there are certain drivers that volunteer, and then we have to go by seniority. And then what they do is when they're in on a midday, so we're not taking them off the road, but during their midday, they come in and they do different tasks in the office, like I said, filing paperwork, some basic items like that. So the goal would be to eliminate all those additional hours through gaining efficiencies of adding this person. Because at the end of the day, I understand we can't just continue to add. We have to, you know, find financial ways to see the recovery of the additional expenditure.
And my only other question, just so we would know what we would be prepared for, are those extra hours something that some of our drivers count on? Like, would we risk losing drivers if they don't have those hours available?
I would say no, because it's not guaranteed time any given day in any given year.
Okay.
It's only identified most of the time, from the way I understand it. They let the pile get pretty tall,
Okay.
and then then they bring in some people to help get that pile down. The beginning of the year is a little crazier type thing, like, you know, it's definitely up and down, and it's not consistent, nor is it guaranteed.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Perry.